Hi guys, welcome to Learn with W3Schools. Today we're going to start with JavaScript objects and we're going to cover basic JavaScript objects functionality, properties, JavaScript methods, display and constructors. So all these topics we're going to cover in this video. So my name is Dr. Zishan. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and follow along. Well, now what are JavaScript objects? So in terms of a real life, and objects are things like houses, cars, peoples, animals, or any other thing. Okay. So for example, if you have a car is an object. Each car has various different properties, such as the name, such as the car model, such as the car weight, and car color. Okay. So these becomes what we call our properties. And in order to access or use these properties, we have something called methods. Okay. So methods again become part of a car's object that allows us to use various different methods that we can use to find data about my car, that what is happening in the car, what's the name, what's the model, what's the drive, what's the brake, and so on and so forth. So in a simple sense, a car can basically, an object is a prototype of your data. It holds information such as properties and methods, and you can use these properties and methods to get information about this car here. Okay. So now how does this work? Well, it works in a very simple sense that we have something called object properties. These object properties allows us to control and access various different individual properties of a car. So in this case, for example, car name is Fiat, car model is 500, car weight is 850, and same car fare. So these are properties that we associate within a particular object that allows us to use these properties and we can access it. Then at the same time, we have something called object methods. Okay, methods are again a block of code that perform a specific task. In this case, the methods allows us to access various different properties and return multiple things, not just single property. The difference between the property and method is the property holds a single value, just like in this case, whereas a method will hold a block of code. So each method here will contain a block of code that we can use to process the data. Okay, it can perform various different operations on the data as well as on the properties. It can access the properties and use those properties and return a result based on that. So each car objects have same methods, but methods are performed at different times. Okay, meaning that you can create multiple objects of a car. Okay, not one, but just like in real life, we have a multiple objects, multiple cars. Each car will have the same method. So no matter how many objects you create, every object you have will have all these methods as well as all these properties. Every object will have that. Every object will contain its own copy of methods as well as its own copy of properties. That's the key thing here. So if you create 10 objects, every individual object will have its own name, own model, own weight, and color, whereas every object will have its own copy of this. And once you use one object, you cannot access the data of another object. Okay, and you can access them at any time, at different times, sequentially, depending on how you want to use it. So that's basic, the gist of what we call object methods are. Now let's talk more about standard JavaScript variables to understand what is variable and how we differentiate variable from an object. So when we say in a standard variable, a variable is basically a container for data values, means it contains of data values standard waves. So this code simply assigns a fiat to a variable named car. So here we have a let car is equals to fiat. So now this becomes what we call a single standard variable, which we can use to save data in our car. Okay, so this is a simple value, single value assigned to a variable called car. Whereas when we talk about JavaScript objects, we say that objects are variables too, but objects can also contain many values. That's the major difference with it. So when we talk about JavaScript objects, an object has multiple values within its system. It can access multiple values. In this case, the values are saved in a what we call key and a pair value. So we have a key and its value. We have a key and its value. We have a key and its value. Okay, so this is considered as an object because we again have a car. We define it as a constant and is equals to with a curly brackets. Okay, so that's the major difference. So when we create a JavaScript object, the one thing that we need to understand that the way JavaScript object and variables differentiate is that object has multiple values. Then object is created with a constant variable, constant prefix, and we use curly brackets. Within the curly brackets, we define key and value pair. We define key and a value pair, comma separated. So the comma here is key important thing here. Every value has a comma after it so that it identifies it until the last variable. So last value here, you will notice that it does not contain any comma here. Okay, because this is supposed to be the last variable. Now, what we do is we go for type fiat model and color value. So this is key value key, its value key, and its value. Okay, so every object has this multiple values. This is how simply JavaScript object is. Using this car, now I can access its type. Using the car, I can access its model. Using this car, I can access its color white. How do we do that? Let's see this. So if we try out the example, now you can see this, that we have a code. This code allows us to simply get a demo. So we create a very simple HTML. We have a PID called demo. We create a JavaScript tag. Within the script tag, we create our first object, which is car. It contains key, colon, value, key, colon, value, key, colon, value. Okay. So now this car behaves like an object because it holds multiple values in an object form. We display the data of each car, or we can access the data of each car using this thing. So we say document.getElementById.demo. We have already talked about this in previous lessons. Again, you can find the links in the description of the previous lectures. So we basically are trying to say, hey, go inside my HTML document, find me an element that has name called demo. So we have an ID called demo here. Change its inner HTML. .inner will allow us to change the HTML of this content. Is equals to the car type is which one? So we say go inside the car object dot type. So dot type basically is accessing this key. So when we access this key, the value is actually returned. If I want to access the model, I will use dot model. This will return the model for me. If I use dot color, it will return the color for me. So this is how we basically simply access the data within our system. Okay. So this is what basic Java objects look like. It's a common to declare variables or Docker objects with a constant keyword. Okay, so variables can also be declared as constants, but most commonly you would find that every object we use uses a constant keyword. Now, JavaScript object definitions. How do we exactly go for it? Okay, how do we define a JavaScript object? So using an object literal, we create an object using a simple object literal. So when we created a car, this is what we call an object literal is. Using the new keyword, then we specify a new keyword that will actually allow the system and tell the system that we are creating a new keyword. And then we use something called object constructor. Okay. So this is just one standard way of creating it. The more way is we define the new keyword and we use object constructor. Okay. How does the object literal work? So an object literal is a list of name and value pairs inside a curly brackets. So this becomes the object literal's variables value. We have name and pair, we have name and pair values. So these name and pair values are called key value pairs. Okay, do keep in mind, so we will be referring to them as key value pairs. So this is one key value pair. So key colon value, key colon value, key colon value. Object literals are also called object initializers. Okay, so object literals are also termed as object initializers. Do keep it in mind. Now, to creating an object, these examples create JavaScript with 4 properties. Here we have again a constant, standard practice. We use a constant. We define a variable name which becomes an object, and then we use curly brackets. So these curly brackets basically define that we are creating a multi-key value pair information here, which is again key value pair, key value pair, key value pair. So the space and space and lines are not important. So you can rephrase or reorient this in a better way, make it more understandable, and you can write it in this way as well. So you again define a constant person, bracket star, bracket close, ends with a semicolon. Then you need first name John, comma, last name Doe, comma, age 50, comma, eye color, and because this is the last property, do remember there's no comma here. Okay, so the last value does not need the comma because it's supposed to be the last. Okay. This example creates an empty JavaScript object and then adds 4 more properties to it. So once you have an object, you can use it. For example, if you try this one out, once we have this object, now to use this, as I said, we use object name dot the key thing. So person dot age will allow us to get its age here. Similarly, you can create a blank object as well, or an empty object as we call them, by simply using curly brackets. Then later on, you can add properties to this object. To add a property to this object, we simply say person.firstname is equals to John. Now this becomes my key. This becomes the value. This becomes the key. This becomes the value. So do keep this thing in mind that when you define an empty object, when you add the property, you basically again use the same thing. You use the key value with the object name. So this becomes my object name. This becomes my key. Okay, and then you define equals to its property. So we use the object name, we use the key last name, and is equals to its value last name. So, and all other properties, all other data that we add will all follow the same principles. We follow the key and we follow the value here. This time no colon needed because we are adding the properties in this case. Okay. Okay, so now let's talk more about this new keyword that we discussed earlier. So this new keyword allows us to create a new object, another empty object without any initial values, and then we can assign the values here. So this example will create us for a new object. So here what we're doing is we're using constant with a person, and then we're saying, hey, create a new object. So now this becomes my default syntax for creating a new object. Now we are telling JavaScript specifically that, listen, I'm creating a new blank object. So here the new keyword is used to define that I'm creating a new object in my scene, and this is object default constructor. So this object will actually call the default constructor and it will create the default object for us. Okay, and then again same, we add the properties with the same name. Okay, we use the properties same function method that we can create, and we can say, hey, go inside here, add the first person dot first name, person dot last name, person dot age, person dot eye color. This becomes same key and value pair. So now we have a same key and value pair information available here. Understand? Wonderful. So now let's talk a little bit. Let's point to note that examples above do the exact same thing. Both use the exact same thing. So here we have created the same thing here. Okay, without the new object, this will still create a new object, and you can use the new object syntax as well to define a new empty object. Okay, so if you don't use it, still it does the same thing. So that's what we're trying to say. But there is no need to use object functions. Okay, for readability and simplicity speed, we use the object literal method most commonly, which is basically this one, object literal method. Okay, so most examples in W3Schools will actually follow this example. Okay, now let's talk more about these object properties. The name value in JavaScript's objects are called properties. So this name value thing that we used, name and then its value. Okay, so this name and then its value becomes what we call named value pair. These are what we refer to in terms of properties. Okay, so this becomes my property, this becomes another property, and this becomes another property. So simply speaking, properties are data that we store inside our objects. Objects are written as a name value pairs similar to associative arrays in PHP. If we have done that, wonderful. Not, I already have a course on my channel, do check it out. Dictionaries in Python, again we will be talking more about Python in the next course coming weeks, so don't forget to subscribe. I will be posting a complete tutorial, complete session on Python as well. Same goes in hash table in C and Java as well. So hash tables in C or hash maps in Java, they also use the same thing, as well as Ruby's in hash. So you see this name and key value information actually is not new to JavaScript. It is used in multiple different languages. That's why it's very important and easy as well, because many languages have a similar structure. Okay. Now accessing the object properties. To access the object properties, we've already talked. Basically, you need what we call object name dot property name. Okay, so object name, or you can use square brackets with the property name within the inverted quotation marks. This syntax is also quite and absolutely valid. Most programming languages, for example, PHP also uses this syntax. We give the object name, square brackets, and we use inverted quotations to access that associative arrays. So in this case, you can use person dot last name to access the object properties, or more specifically, you can use person square brackets inverted quotations last name. So here you can see this will be the most commonly used because it's more simpler, easy to follow, and easy to understand. Here you need to enter a few extra characters, but still, as I said, many languages tend to follow this kind of a structure where we use the object name, square brackets, inverted quotations. So JavaScript also supports these both, depends on how basically you want to progress. Okay. Now let's talk more about JavaScript methods. What do we mean by JavaScript methods? So methods are actually actions that can be performed on objects. More specifically, methods are what we call block of code. Okay, so by block of code, we mean that they are a block of code that has a start and it contains certain information that you can execute. Okay, it performs a specific task. In this case, we say that methods are function definitions and are stored as properties. So in last class, we talked about functions already, right? So if you have following my session, you can check it out in the description. I already have the functions tutorial. We made the detailed talk about what functions are in JavaScript and how we use them. Okay, so don't forget to check out this eye icon at the top. You can find it, or just go down in the description below. Okay, once you do that, you understand functions are similar to that. We again have methods, but this methods is what we call more specific to objects. So whenever we are using objects, we refer the word methods. Understand? Wonderful. So now we say that methods are basically function definitions stored as a property values. Okay. So in terms of objects, we say methods are function definitions. In other words, are functions, but they are stored as a property values. So instead of just declaring a standard function that we have done previously, they are stored actually as a property values. What do we mean by that? Let me show you. So just like a single property and its value, just like a single property and its value here at the last name, just like a single property and a key value pair we use. Similarly, function are also created with a function name, and the value itself is actually the function body. So instead of declaring a separate function with a function word and a function name, then it's created a little bit differently. Okay. So in other words, what we do is we define the function name first, then we use the function keyword, and then we give the block of code. So if you have following my lecture in previous sessions, we talked about function where we use the function keyword first. However, when we create JavaScript object methods, that's why we refer the word as methods in JavaScript. Methods basically refer to specific methods or functions that belong to an object. And the way we write them is that we write the name first, then we give the function word, brackets are bracket close, and then we give a curly brackets to define the function body. How it's done in the code, inside the code we say, okay, for example, we have this thing. Now we declare a constant person, bracket star, bracket close. We define its 4 main properties here. So these are like 3 main properties. First one, they contain a single key value pair. Then the fourth one is actually function name, colon, and then function word. This will create a function for us. So this syntax here is actually defining the function similar to that same object, property and its value. So key and value, key and value. This becomes the key, and the value this time is actually the function body itself. This is where the function comes into play. Okay. So now when we talk about objects, we use the word methods because they are declared as what we refer to function properties. Okay. So they are basically property values or a function properties that we define. Then in the syntax, we use bracket start, bracket close again. So do make sure that they also use a block so that it defines a block of code, and then they can perform any sort of legal statement that we can write within JavaScript. So all of this code or whatever we discussed can actually be written inside here. Here we are saying that the return this dot first name plus this dot last name. So actually within the function now I can access these methods as well. That's the beauty of it. So now I'm accessing these methods directly inside the function. That's how we basically process. So in this example, the word this refers to the person object itself. So actually I'm referring to my own data within my object. So using this, I can access my own data. So when I say this dot first name, this basically means that I'm referring to my own first name. When it says this dot last name, it means that I'm referring to my own last name. So here it's referring to our own last name that we say. So this last name actually is referring to this thing, and this first name is actually referring to this first name. Okay. So using this, we are able to access my own data within the methods. That's the beauty of this thing. So in this example, we did that. Now let's talk very quickly about JavaScript. In JavaScript, objects are basically kings. They are very important to understand, and we use objects consistently throughout JavaScript. Okay, I am already making multiple videos on the detailed advanced level of JavaScript. So we're going to talk more about these things as well. But in a simple sense, we say that objects are containers for properties and methods. So when we talk about objects, they are considered as containers that contain properties and methods. We already discussed a few moments ago. Properties are valued in names, methods are functions and stored as properties. Okay. So when we talk about object, we say that objects are containers. They contain information about certain property and methods. Properties hold single key value. Methods are basically functions that perform multiple tasks. That's how we work with that. Okay. So in JavaScript, almost everything is an object. Oh yeah, that's the beauty of JavaScript, and this is where actually the advanced JavaScript comes into play, where we try to understand how JavaScript is working. In JavaScript, we say that the best way to understand JavaScript is that everything is inside JavaScript is objects. So objects itself obviously are objects, but when we use math operations, we use them as an object. Functions, we use them as an object. We use dates as an object, arrays as an object, maps as an object, sets are objects. Everything inside JavaScript basically deals with that. Okay, so if you're working more specifically, we're going to talk later on. I have already made a video completely detailed on JavaScript HTML DOM. So DOM object is actually document object model, which considers your entire document things as an object, and you can use everything there. Then we have something called browser DOM as well. So this again becomes a complete object behavior. Again, these are two different tutorials going to be posting very soon, so don't forget to stick around or check out the membership to get an early access to all these videos. I'm already working on them. Okay, so this is basically one thing we have to keep in mind. We already saw a few examples. So if you check out any example, you see this, we use document. This document behaves like an object. We have a function inside it, and then we have a value inside it. Okay, another function property that we can access to change this data. So we are already using what we call document object model, and this is what basically it's trying to say. Okay, so now let's talk more about JavaScript properties. Okay, so the object properties in Java are the most important part of JavaScript objects. Okay, so an object is an unordered collection of properties. Do always keep in mind there's no order. It depends on how you declare them, because they're always mapped with a key and value properties. Okay, so the key and value actually are important. The order in which they define is not important. So the properties can be changed, added, deleted, and some are considered read only. We'll try to explore all of them. So accessing the JavaScript properties, how do we access them? So for example, the syntax of accessing a property of an object is defined as such. So we have let age. Again, we create a simple variable. We call the object dot age. So this is basically how we access the properties. And remember, we did also say that you can use brackets as well to access the property. So instead of referring to the object, we can easily say that we use angle brackets, and at the same time, we can also use what we have without the angle brackets as well. So both are actually valid in terms of accessing the properties. At the same time, you can write an expression as well. So you can say person, and when bracket starts, and basically an expression which comes to this point, as well as any other expression that you want. So for examples, persons dot first name plus is. So now person is an object. We are accessing the first name as its property is person dot age. So this will allow us to access the person age. So if you want to try out the code again is simple. So we create a constant person object is equals to bracket start, bracket close, and we define the properties inside them. Okay, so it has these basic information that we need in terms of object. Then we go inside, hey, there's a document, get me an element called demo, which is this element here, and we say dot inner HTML, change its inner HTML to person dot first name. So go inside the person and find me the first name. So this John will be returned here, and then we're going to say person dot age, find this age, and then return that to me. So this is how basically we access the data elements here. Same you can do with the square brackets as well. Same you can do with this person angle square brackets. If you use this again is going to do the same thing. So you can use again document.id, the same person object has been created here, and then we can use inner HTML to change this inner HTML here, and we say, listen boss, now we need person of first name. So person is an object with these angle brackets. We can use and access this first element object here. Okay, same goes here, person age. So this is asking is for the key value object, and key is there, so this age will be basically referred here. Okay, so this is how we tend to refer to these particular objects. Similarly, you can go inside and write an expression. So in other words, the expression would mean that you can write another variable name here as well. So in this case, we are saying, hey, let x is equals to first name. Once you have that, now you can say, hey, let y is equals to age. So we have a y is equals to age. So we create two standard variables using the JavaScript function. Then we say person x. So person x basically meaning that now we have a standard person x object, and then x is actually same key value things. So that's why these square brackets sometimes can be very useful if you are using or driving the basic data or the key value from another variable information. So here the key variable information is first name, which is basically being derived through this thing. And person y basically will become age. So this age string will be basically replaced here, and it can print us the value. Okay, so these are three ways of actually using it. So you can use variables, or you can use what we call a standard key if you already know, or just write the key name itself without this angle brackets. That will work fine. How about adding new properties? Now, to add a new properties, obviously you can do that. We just go inside the person and add nationality is equals to English. So for example, if you check out the code is very simple. We create a simple object called person. We have first name, last name, age, and eye color. So initially we have these four attributes. So these four properties will basically be by default present. Then we say, hey, access the person, which is this person object, and add a new component here. All right, so add a new property here called nationality is equal to English. So this is how we simply added. This is as simple as it gets, and now you can easily print the nationality here. That will allow us to access this nationality new attribute that we just added. Okay, so this is how we add the attributes to our system as well. Then similarly, you can delete the attribute as well, or delete the property by using the delete keyword. So delete is a keyword. This time you need to use person. To add, you don't need to do anything. Just write personal nationality and it will be added to the object. That's it. Okay. However, to delete, you need to use a delete keyword to delete a property. Okay. And then similarly, since we are using delete age, which will delete this age here, you can use square brackets to delete the same as well. Okay. Then we need to do nested properties. Now this is again sometimes we use which in general is known as 2D arrays or multidimensional arrays or multidimensional lists. In this case, nested objects, meaning object within an object. So means that object itself can be a property of another object. So here we have an object which is actually a property of the main my object. Okay, so my cars colon bracket star bracket close, this becomes another object which is nested inside this my object. So this is sometimes also referred to as two-dimensional objects, or in other words, generally now we refer it to as nested objects, meaning object within an object. The rule follows exactly same. We define a key, and instead of a value, we define the object data or object properties. Remember, for function, we define the name as a key, colon, and we write the function keyword. And then we define the block of function. For a multi-dimensional objects or nested objects, we just use same object name or another key, colon, and then bracket star bracket close. This will define a nested objects. Okay. So you can access the nested objects using the dot notation and the bracket notation. So in order to access this cars, you go and you say, hey, I have an object called my object, which is this main object here, this one. So we are accessing this object using this. Then we go inside my cars, which basically is this my cars object. And then we're saying, hey, access the car2 element. So the car2 will basically be accessed. So this is like the main. Then we go inside the nest, and then we inside access the property here. Okay. So this becomes object within an object. And since the rules of accessing the properties are same, so you can directly use the name here, or you can use the square brackets, or you can go for the expression. In other words, save this value in a variable and ask the variable to print that. Moreover, to access it in a more random way, we can also access my objects and my cars as well, because again, this my cars is what we refer to, or this my cars, as we say, we refer to the key value, and the key value can be referred using a square brackets. So you can use, hey, go inside my objects, then go inside my cars, then inside my cars there's a car property. So this my key becomes my cars becomes a key. This my car is also a key. So the every key can be used within the square brackets. So we use this thing as well. So this is also a common practice you might come across. But more conveniently, we use this. But this sometimes what happens is that when you use this, it's a little confusing what's happening here. So either you use this one, this becomes more natural way, or you use this one. This becomes more natural way of reading that I have a my object. Inside this, I have a my cars, and inside my cars, I have a car too. So this one usually for me specifically, I find it not very convincingly easy to follow than what's happening here, right? So this is more easiest way, my object dot my cars dot car2. This is what we usually see in documents dot get element by id dot get inner HTML, nested objects as we call them. This also works fine. Similarly, you can also use let method. Let and create a new variables and declare variables inside your standard JavaScript. Then use these variable names as an expression inside your my object. Common way. Usually this means that maybe the values are coming from server, or you're reading some data from your column name. So this can be like a column name, and then this another column name, and then we populate the column names here. So if you are loading the data dynamically, basically this could also work. Sometimes this also works when we are parsing JSON objects with JavaScript. So this can also be a JSON keys that are we read from the server, and then using those key values we process it. That's how basically we complete this thing. Okay, so now this completes Java object properties. Let's move on to object methods. Okay, now again we have talked briefly about methods already, so a little bit more about these methods. Since we already know that object methods are actions that can be performed on an object, they are like block of code instructions that needs to be performed on that object alone. So a method is a function definition that stores a property and value. Okay, so we have already discussed this in a moment ago. Okay, so now for example, we have a property called first name value, we have last name value, we have age value, even eye color value. But a method is again a key and a function. So the only difference is instead of giving it a single static value, we write the function with round brackets, and then curly brackets begin the block of code that defines anything that you can write in a standard JavaScript. So all JavaScript legal statements can actually be written inside here. So now this becomes our standard method. Okay. So now moving further, let's do one more example of it. So how we define a function is in this way. So we say, hey, I have a object called person, block start, block close. So all this becomes my object's definition. I declare few variables here, or in other words, few properties. Then again using, so see, key colon value, key colon value, key colon value. Now we have a key and we have a function, specifically a keyword that defines that the value actually is a function. Okay. Then we define what we call block start, block close, and the function body. So this is how it's supposed to row. So if you check out the code, we get the same code. This time again, we have p data, and then we access the script code here. Okay, inside the script code, we define function name, and then when we want to execute this, we use person dot full name bracket start bracket close. This is the key thing that now you need to remember. For a property, you just use the property name. For the property, you just use the key name. For property, you just use the ID. Okay, this names here. But because you're calling a function that is called full name function, hence you need to use these angle brackets. Do very be careful about that. These angle method brackets or round brackets are defined that I'm accessing a method inside my object. Okay, so this method is being accessed here using this person dot full name with round brackets. So this is accessing the methods, and if you don't use the methods, JavaScript will assume that you are accessing the property here called first name. Okay, so again, this is full name, this is first name, but there is no property called full name, hence they generate an error. So to access the methods, we basically need to use these angle brackets. Okay, so accessing object methods. So you can access object methods with the following syntax. Again, object name, method name, bracket start, bracket close, just like we talked now. So if you invoke full name dot property with angle brackets, it will execute a function. So for example, if you say name is equals to full name function, it will execute the full name and return the value, and I save it back inside the name variable. So if you want to check out the code, what we're doing now is we create a function called full name, and it's a function definition, block start, block close. Because we have used a return here, this is not a mandatory thing. It depends on what you want to do or what this function purpose is. In this case, just return me the full name, combining first name and last name. So now if I say return this dot first name, again, we have already talked about this. To access the method or properties of my own object, I need to use the word this. So this will define that I'm using methods of my own class or function or properties of my own class. Okay, so this will allow access it, and we use it as a return. So this means that combine these two strings together using these plus concatenations, and then we say combine them together and then return the answer. So whenever we call the function, means person dot full name, we are actually calling this function, and when this function is called, it's going to combine these two things together and then return then this whole new string as an answer, as a reply. So we're going to get a reply which will then be sent to this document.getElementById.InnerHTML, and it will be printed on our demo here. That's why we get Jodo ID here. Okay, makes sense. So this is how basically we can access it. Adding a method to an object, so we can add new methods to an object also, just like properties. So if you check this out again, the way it works is you give object name dot the name of the function is equals to function body, and then block start, block close, same thing. So if this was just the property, you would give it a value within the inverted quotations, but this is a method, hence this method again requires you to use the function word, block start, block close, and you define whatever the function is supposed to do. So person.name will basically add a new property in our object, but because it's a method, it will convert that property into a method, and then the data will be saved. Okay. So using JavaScript methods, for the example uses the JavaScript to uppercase method to convert a text string. So you can use what we call JavaScript's default methods as well. The way it's been used is, for example, I create person.name function, return, and I encapsulate everything inside the round brackets so that this string gets solved first, and when whatever is returned from this entire operation is actually converted to uppercase. Okay, so this is a standard uppercase method. We're going to talk more about this in strings and methods later on in this the whole video session. So don't forget to follow along. This basically means that obviously this is a default method that exists in JavaScript. You can use that for your purpose as well. Okay, wonderful. Let's just round this up with the last topic called JavaScript Display Object Display. So this object display is basically defining that how do we display JavaScript objects. Okay, again, simple. So to displaying a JavaScript object, it will output object, meaning that, for example, if I create an object called person having name, city, and age, and we go and say, hey, document.get element by id.innerHTML, and then person. This time I'm not accessing any property. All right. So see this, no property name has been specified here. Only the object name has been used directly. What's going to be the output of this? If you check out the code, you would find that it represents object. So it says that, hey, it's an object and it's an object. So in other words, it's returning a basic metadata about this particular person, not the actual values. Why? Because this is an object. An object has data inside it. You cannot just say print the whole data. Okay. Unless you create another custom method inside it that prints the whole data of an object. So what we're trying to do now is we are just saying, hey, print person, and actually person is an object. So in fact, it returns us the metadata, the type of this object, which is, this is an object called object. Okay, so this is what it's trying to do. So some solutions to display JavaScript objects are displaying the object properties by name. So again, display the object properties by name, so we can access each property by name. We already did that. Display object properties in a loop. We can use a loop to traverse through each element and process it. We can use the object properties using the values default function. This is again a default function that every object possesses. So we can use this values method to display the data, as well as we can use JSON stringify to convert the object into a string. We talked about this, that it works in for JSON form, so we can use this as well. So now let's just see how it's doing. So let's check out the first thing, displaying object properties, right? The first one. So the properties of an object can be displayed as a string. In other words, if you have an object, you can directly go and say, hey, listen, print name, print person age, and person city. So this is actually accessing each element or each property inside an object and printing its values. Okay, so this is all what we have been doing in previous talks already. So this is the first method of how we display the objects. The other method that we haven't really talked about is called displaying the properties in a loop. So if you have many properties in an object, like 10, 20, it's not recommended to print every single thing manually. You might not want to do that. So we use typically something called loops. How the loops work is, we create a simple object that has like 3 properties. Then we build a text. So we create let text, a variable is declared with an empty string. So we say that for let x in a person, block start, block close. So now this means we are using a for loop. So this for loop is going to do one basic thing for us. The for loop is going to do is that let x declare a new variable called x in person. So in person means this one. So now this single line of code, it's so powerful that it's going to do multiple operations together for us. So it's going to loop through using the for loop every element inside the person, reads the first element inside the loop, and then assigns it to the variable x. Then when the loop body executes, we can easily print the data. Then again, the loop will iterate and read the second element of the loop, assign that from the person. So read the second element from the person and then assign it to x. And then again, we can use this syntax to loop through that element. Then again, the loop will execute and go inside the third element of the loop. And then from that person, it's going to read the third element and assign it back to x. And then we basically print that x element here. And then when it goes fourth time, it says, hey, there are no more elements here. So the loop going to exit. So what this does in a single line is that it will automatically traverse each element within your object, assign it to the x, and then you can use this x as a key thing with your person and then print it. So this is again something we have already talked just right now a few moments ago. So we say that, hey, you can use the expression here. So this is going to do exactly that. Now I'm traversing through each element of my object, each property of an object without actually calling the name and using a loop to traverse it. Okay, so this for x or for in loop is, as it known as commonly, the for in loop is so powerful that it allows us to do that. Now if you use text here, this will basically go and print the whole text string. Okay, so just to check it out, if you execute the code, it's going to say John 30 New York, because that's what the string is, John 30 in New York. It's going to traverse through each element. Then and we say, hey, go inside my document, get me an element that has an ID called demo. Again, any name you can specify here. Change its .inner HTML to text. So that's why we use the text variable. We access the elements and then we added the space, and then this new string is actually saved inside the text variable. Wonderful, right? So this is one way of displaying or traversing through your elements or traversing through your properties in an object. So you must use %x in a loop. Do note that, because only then you can actually use the x as a variable for the key. Okay, only then then you can use it. So %x will not work because the x is the loop variable and the value is continuously changing. If you use %x, this is not going to work. You need to use the third form of displaying the properties, object properties we just talked, which is again using the expression here. Okay, let's talk about this using object.values method. Okay, the third way of accessing and displaying the content of a object. The third says that we use something called object.values. Okay, so this object.values creates an array from the property values. It automatically reads the content and converts it into an array, and then you can use the array here. So for example, we can say, hey, I have an object contains some values. This object has constant and my array, so I declare an array variable. Again, this is just a variable up till now until we use object.values as a person. So now what we are doing is we are basically asking JavaScript to read this object and convert it into an array. So convert all the values, not the actually key, but these values here. So this John will basically be converted, this 30 will be converted, this New York will be converted. So these values will be converted into an array form using object.values and then assigned to this variable here called myArray. Then once you print a myArray, basically you will be able to access all the elements inside it. Okay, so this is how we basically try to traverse it. Now, using object entries. Now, there's another method called object entries. It makes it simple to use objects inside a loop. So, if you are into using the loops, it's very easy and convenient way if you want to use the object entries method. The way it again works is that it takes fruits. It takes, again, we have a 3 fruits inside it. Finally, they decide to change the variable. So, in this W3Schools, we use something called fruits 3 times. 3 fruits have been specified, so this becomes our new object. Now we create a variable called text. We create a loop. Okay, so this time it's called for loop and for off loop, not the for in loop that we used previously. So this is another version of for loop, which is for off loop. So we're now saying, hey, I have a fruit, which is actually a variable name. We have a value, so this becomes another value. Okay, and then I'm going to say of object entries fruits. Okay, so this is going to assign and read the entries inside the fruits, and then based on this method object entries is going to read one by one every entry and assign it to this pair here. So it's going to again do the same thing like the for in loop, but this time it's going to read each entry inside our object and assign it as a key and value pair to this variable. Then we can use, hey, fruit is equals to plus colon is plus value. So whatever is the value for the first will be assigned. Now again, this will not assign all the fruit at once. So all these fruits will not be assigned at once. Because we are using a for loop, it's going to traverse, read the first element, bananas and 300. So it's going to read this entry, not the value alone, but the entry. And it's going to come here and assign it to this thing. So fruit will be our banana and its value will be here. So key and value will be matched. So the first value will be mapped and assigned to this variable here. Okay. Once that is done, it's going to process and print that fruit and value information. Then it's going to read the second value and again assign it to this thing. So this will be representing oranges and values. Once this is done, it's going to get it printed out. Again, the loop will reiterate. This time, fruit and value will have this third information here. Okay, so the apples will be assigned to this thing. Once this is done, then it's going to get it printed out. Okay, this is how this method works. Personally, I always prefer the for in loop, much more convenient, but again, people tend to have their own preferences. So we create a variable, an object. Let text is equals to an empty string. So we say, hey, I have a fruit amount. So we declare an associative array. that contains a fruit and amount, two variable names, these are of object entries. So basically, again, object entries is a built-in method that allows us to read every entry in our this thing here in our object. So every entry basically will be read and assigned to this thing here. So next, this entry will be read and will be assigned to here. So every entry will be read and assigned to this guy here. And then we can use fruit and amount variable values to basically get it printed or do any operations on them as we want. Hence, when it get printed, you see we are printing the key as well as its value. We are printing the key as well as its value. We are printing the key as well as its value. Okay, so that's how it's supposed to basically work with that. Finally, in order to use this or display object contents, we use JSON stringify method. So JavaScript objects can be converted into a string with a JSON method called JSON stringify. This is a default method that exists, JSON stringify, that converts our normal object into a JSON format and then turns into a string. Okay, so JSON stringify is included in JavaScript and is supported with all major browsers. So this is actually a default method. You don't need to do anything. It's by default present. Just use it. How do we use it? So the first thing that we need to note is that the result will be a string written in JSON notation. So the result that this method is going to return will be in a JSON string form because it's going to convert our object into a JSON format. Okay, so we say name John, age 50, city New York. So in JSON, it follows a similar structure. However, the key is also inside the inverted quotations. This is a typical JSON. If you want to learn more about JSON, I have just recently uploaded a complete tutorial on JSONs, so you can follow along as well. Do check this out from W3Schools. I've already posted. Let's talk a little bit more about what JSON is and how basically we're gonna use that. So moving on, and let's try out an example of this thing and see how it's basically gonna work. Again, an object, same, unfortunately no more fruits. We use the same person example, document by object inner.html, and then we use this JSON stringify person. It's going to take this object and convert it into a JSON string. This now is his JSON string, and every JSON string again has a similar format. It needs curly brackets, so it's going to print the curly brackets. We use the name and key parameter information. The only difference to remember again is that the name is also in inverted quotations. The value is also in inverted quotations. Comma separated, again name and value. So every data, every information is in fact within the inverted quotation marks. Okay, that's how basically we differentiate with it. Okay. Finally, the last topic about this course is object and constructor. Okay, so now we did talk about that about a little bit about constructors when we started talking about objects. Let's get a little bit more into detail. What do we mean by constructor? So sometimes we need to create many objects of the same type. To create object type, we use object constructor functions. So in certain situations, you need to create multiple objects of the same type. To do that, we need something called object type, which uses object constructor function. It is considered a good practice to name constructor functions with an uppercase first letter. Good practice. Let me show you why. So for example, object type person, we have function, we create a person, and then we first, last, age, and evening. So this becomes a standard function definition. We say this dot first name. So access my current object and change its first name to the first parameter that we passed here. The last will be saved here. The age will basically be saved here, and eye color will be saved in eye color information. Okay. So if you check out the code, this is how it's supposed to look like. So now we get a better idea of what basically is happening here. First, we create a constructor function, which is this one. So this becomes my constructor function. Why we call it a constructor function? Because it uses the same name as the constructor. Okay, so when we create an object, actually we have talked about this. We use new keyword to create an object. So when we create a new object using the new keyword and we define the person, it's actually calling this person here. And because we are using with the new, this will behave as a constructor. And we have set it that it needs 4 arguments. So the 4 arguments are again specified in the argument list. So this is going to create a new object and it will call this function constructor every time the object is created. So every time a new object of type person is created, it will go and create a new person object with values. So I can have different values here as well. And then we can just simply say my father, because we have assigned it to this my father variable. So now this new object is assigned to my father. It's going to be presented here. Then we can easily print it out. So for example, if you want to customize this a little bit more, you can easily say, hey, let me just create another object here. So I can say constant, constant my CHA channel is equals to new CHA, a new person. Okay, because we are creating object of the same type, that's why we need the constructor. So we use round brackets, semicolon. So inside here I can say my name, Dr. Zishan BHATTI. Okay, and the last name can be comma. For example, my channel name, learn with W3SCH schools. Okay, and the age, for example, I can be 104. I like to be that. And then finally, the eye color can be and within inverted quotations green, which are not, but green from the W3 schools. So now you see what happened now, that we have one object definition inside the constructor here. Okay, so inside the constructor we have one object definition, but we create two objects of the same type. This is what it means, that now you are creating another person object with a completely different value. So here, once you go and you want to change the value, so for example, I can have another paragraph tag here, and I can say P is equals to ID, inverted quotations, and I can go CHA channel, paragraph close, backslash P, paragraph close. So now I have another paragraph here. Okay, let's add a BR to it so that we have a BR, and then usually we leave it here. Now, in order to access it, what I can do is, let me just copy this whole code, Control C. Let's be a little bit lazy. We say again, document.id, get element by ID. This time I want to find the ID called CHAEEN channel, inner.html, and now I want to print this. So I can say my name is, inverted quotations close, plus add the my CHA channel object dot. For example, I can go and say, hey, let's just, oops, why did I use this here function? So I can say, listen, let's add first name. So I can add first name. Now, how do I know the first name? First name is here, this dot first name. So this actually refers to the data of my object. I know that. This becomes my key, the value came from here. This becomes my key, last name, the value actually came from here. Age becomes the key, the value comes from here, and the eye color. So once you do that, and if you execute, my name is Dr. Shanbhatti gets printed, because now I've created another object. First name is my father, which is again, right? So my father age is 50. Sorry, I thought it was printing the name. So it's printing the age here. So my father age is 50, and my channel name is here. So if you want to add more strings, you can access this object dot any of these properties, and it will use the value that you provide here. This is what we say, that when you use same object and create multiple copies of it. Every time, every copy we create will be an independent copy of this object. But this time, this is called a constructor, and it initializes the object using these methods. The object needs to be created using the new person. This name and this name have to be same. Okay, so the name that we specify here has to be same name as here. Only then it will call this constructor and initialize and execute the object, and then all other object rules basically apply on them. That's how we access the simple objects. Okay, so the same examples have been done here. We create multiple persons of the same type. If you want to check out the code, we can say, let's just come here, same person, we have my father, my mother. We create two objects here, and then we use what we call document.id my father.age, which will actually print my father age, and then I can use my mother age, and this is going to print my mother age. Okay, so within the same line or separately, now we can access both the object's data using the object name, and the object actually is created using this new person. Because we're using a new person, it's going to call this constructor here called person. It begins with function. Actually, that's where the confusion usually occurs. I would have preferred if JavaScript people have actually used the word constructor here, which actually they do when we talk more about in other ways, but in other objects and classes structure, but that's how it usually goes. Okay. Now, default values are again simple things. Sometimes you don't want to specify any values, so the nationality is by default English. Means you hard code a value here. The value is not being provided while we create the object. You can create and initialize a default value. You can add the value with the exact same thing that we did previously. Use the object name dot nationality, and it will add this new value to that. Okay, and then you adding a property to a constructor. You cannot add a new property to an object constructor. So for example, if I click on this one, it means that if I have an object here, okay, which is actually through a constructor, I create two new objects, my father and my mother, and then I will use person dot nationality is equals to English. So what's happening here is that I'm adding a new property directly to this person class. This is not allowed. So if you try to add a new property directly to this class, then it's not going to work. So this person actually is referring directly to this person. That is not allowed. Okay, you can add a new property to my father. So if this person was adding my father dot nationality, that's completely allowed. But because I've used person here, this is not allowed here. This person is invalid. This will generate an error. So that's what it's basically talking about, and that's why the answer is undefined here. It doesn't know you. This will not basically work. So you can add the new value using my father dot nationality. This will work, but do make sure you don't add a property directly to a constructor. Okay. Constructor methods and functions, again, they all work in the same manner. So you can have new functions defined inside a constructor exactly in the same manner. So for example, full name again becomes the key is equals to, we use the function bracket star bracket close block star block close. Okay, so if you have understood all the previous concepts, you can add a new function to this constructor. This basically just behaves like a normal object. However, we use the word function and person, and the person, when we create the object also has to be created with the same way. Only then JavaScript will understand. So when you use this, you have to make sure the person with the capital P is again using new person capital P. With these two words added, only then JavaScript will understand, this is a constructor. Otherwise, it might just assume that you are creating a function here because it precedes with the word function for some reason. Okay, so adding a method to an object, you can add a new method just like we talked about previously as well. If you have an object name dot change name is equals to function, and you can pass it an argument and we use any value with that. So this also is again same thing. So we can add a methods. You can not add a new method to an object constructor. So same rule again applies, just like object adding a variable. You cannot do this. You cannot add a property directly to a person. Similarly, you cannot add a function directly to the constructor as well. So you cannot use person or prototype or anything of that sort. This will actually not work. You need to use object name to add the constructor. So JavaScript has built-in constructors for all native objects. So all objects that we talked earlier, the JavaScript has many standard built-in objects. So it has all built-in constructors as well. So new object you can create using this syntax. Again, it has a constructor. You can create a new array. We create a new map, a new set, new date is commonly used. Regular expressions is something that we use. New function for creating a new function object. All of these actually have a default constructor within. So do note that the math object is not in the list because math is a global object. The new keyword cannot be used on the math. Okay, so I will be talking a little bit more about math class later on in this series. So do be updated. But for math, default constructor does not exist because math actually is a global object. It's globally available. So in other words, it doesn't need an object, a constructor, or doesn't have one. Okay. So, did you know? Let's go for final pro tips before I end this session. That you use object literals inside the brackets instead of new object. So you can create new object using the curly brackets without using the new object word. We are going to have talked about this. Similarly, you can create an array literal with the array sign instead of using the new array keyword as well. Okay, we talked about this a little bit earlier in here that you can just create a new object using the round brackets as well, but you can use the word new object. Similarly, for a new array, there's no need. You can use it, but if you use a square brackets, every time you use a square brackets to create an array, actually you're creating a new object and you don't need to write that. So use pattern backslash brackets backslash instead of using regular expressions. More about regular expressions later on in this session. So do keep updated. I will be making more videos on that. And same goes with using a function expression, bracket, bracket, and an angle bracket. This is what we use for to creating a functions, okay, instead of using the new function. So that's why you don't see new function or new array or new object being used continuously, because actually you can use these shorthand versions. Understand? Okay. So that completes today's session of objects, all about objects in one video, how a JavaScript object works and how they are. We try to cover as much as we can. So I hope you understand all these concepts and enjoy the video. Didn't fall asleep. Do leave me your comments. Let me know what you liked and didn't like about this. Do you need more examples, more details about this, how to use them? Let me know in the comments below. This is Dr. Zishan signing off. Now, next, let's talk more about object properties.